Imagine a country where shadows lurk not from enemies abroad, but from the very heart of its people. Can you picture the chill of fear gripping ordinary streets, where neighbors eye each other with suspicion? The Russian Federation plunges into its darkest era yet. No longer do citizens dread missiles from Ukraine. Instead, terror stalks their own sidewalks and alleys. Vladimir Putin has unleashed a brutal gamble, cracking open society's prisons to fuel his endless war. Think of it, 180,000 hardened criminals set free, cloaked in false patriotism. The deal from the Kremlin is stark. Endure 6 months battling on the front. Erase your past. Claim freedom anew. And now, that deadline looms. Survivors return, scarred souls clutching guns, veteran badges, and a hunger for chaos they can't contain. These battle-worn figures flood homes with weapons gripped tight, that metallic scent of grease and gunpowder lingering on their skin. In the British Ministry of Defence's December 2025 report, they devastate society anew with unrelenting cruelty. Vertska Media's figures lay bare the horror: nearly 550 lives stolen, 465 more shattered by violence. Where has law vanished? That question burns in every mind. Russia's enforcement crumbles, public safety dissolving into systematic ruin. A gaping void, 172,000 officers absent from the Interior Ministry. Over 1/3 of roles lie empty. Eastern Urals and North Caucasus sea forces halved in 5 years. Remote spots hit 90% depletion. Villages echo hollow without patrols. Leningrad region epitomizes this fall. Districts once guarded by 7 now by one lone figure spanning vast kilometers. Why this abyss of protection? Economics and politics twist the blade. Officers scrape by on 38,000 rubles, about $380 less than a Moscow grocer's pay. Putin dangles riches for war recruits, sign-ons up to 200,000 rubles, bonuses piling high. Youth flock to battle or flee borders. Policing loses allure. Yet the rot spreads beyond badges. Courts bend under weight. Wagner's 2022 to 2023 amnesty scheme wiped slates for war service, passed to defense in 2024. Sentences lighten still for fighters. Controversial laws bring shattering fallout. Judges hail returnees as unsung patriots. Crime cases see mercy for valiant deeds. Worse, expunged records treat recidivists as novices. Murders and assaults slip with leniency. Medusa outlet chronicles this betrayal. Kremlin's 2023 edict silences media, shield returning troops' misdeeds to sustain spirit. Truth hides, streets breed blind. Courts favor the battle-scarred with subtle nods. Behind closed chambers, a grimmer shadow swells. Mediazona's December 2025 tally, 90,000 claims to declare missing soldiers deceased clog benches. Since mid-2024, 2,500 pile weekly. What does it reveal? State refuses to reclaim fallen bodies. Lists them vanished, dodging costs, burials, admissions of defeat. Putin denies the toll, forcing families into courtroom strife to prove loss. Nation splits, grief haunts courts while violence erupts outside. These aren't seasoned warriors. No honed soldiers calm. Impulsive, volatile packs equipped with alcohol-fueled rage, weapon cravings. Invulnerability delusions, ticking disasters in civilian guise. Consider the Ulyanovsk region chill. Alexander Lomachin, from Z-Storm Unit, stabs a disabled man after drunken spat. Routine quarrel turns lethal reflex. Tragedy deepens with Rosamykin, Wagner freed. 10th day home, slays elderly renter. Interruptions? None. Mikhail Mulichkov, another Wagner hand, claims 2 lives in arresting caravan. Insights from judges chill deeper. Defendants boast remorse-free, I can still serve. Send more Ukrainians beyond. Not guilt, but warthirst speeches. State-forged moral void on display. Ministry data fuels dread, first half 2025, soldier-linked murders doubled to 116. Reported only. Total severe offenses soar past 333,000, 15-year peak. Panic swells. Suspicion festers, is the stranger beside you a pardoned killer? Law flounders against Putin's new elites. Cracks form in Russia's core. Citizens fed to armed thugs see betrayal. Powerless authority breeds turmoil. Crime spikes inflate security spends, choking investments and life flows. Provincial towns turn grey no man's lands with front returnees ruling, police hesitant. Rasamakan case exposes folly, vowed oversight fails to avert slayings. Doctrine of safety erodes inwardly. Paranoia rules supreme. FSB targets homegrown scientists instead of threats. New edict bans foreign ties without approval. Scholars like Anatoly Maslov and Alexander Shiplyuk, masters of hypersonic tech, jailed for betrayal. Putin cripples intelligence creators he claims to shield. Pure folly. Could festering rage topple his iron reign after 25 years? Absolutely. St. Petersburg flares, schools demand resignation, criticizing special ops, soldier bashing deemed extremist. Uprising potential amplifies with 90,000 ghosts haunting bureaucracy. Lost kin fractured Kremlin loyalty endlessly. What desperate moves await now? The storm builds, unseen forces stirring rebellion's dawn. Russian citizens remain in the shadows, clueless about the surge of offenses erupting on their very sidewalks. Courts soften penalties for certain perpetrators, merely due to their battlefield stints. Even if hero isn't uttered officially, decisions lean mercifully. Yet, a harsher truth looms for the legal system. As tribunals absolve offenders, a grimmer stack of dossiers piles up in secrecy. Mediazona's December 2025 dossier uncovers 90,000 pending suits in Russian tribunals, declaring absent troops deceased. From mid-2024, about 2,500 fresh petitions flood courts weekly. Can you fathom this? The regime withholds the remains of fallen warriors. They label them vanished, slashing payouts and avoiding funerals. Putin's administration erases casualties, trims expenses, and sidesteps admitting battlefield defeats. Bereaved can endlessly roam lobby halls, striving to confirm their offspring's demise. Half the nation clings to judicial mazes, while the other endures street carnage. To sharpen this image further, these aren't traditional veterans. Scrutinized closely, they lack seasoned combat instincts. Instead, acting as feral, impulsive predators steeped in brutality. Booze, scars, firearm grip, and invincibility delusions morph them into roving bombs. Picture the vile odor of stale liquor clinging to the air in Ulyanovsk, where Alexander Lomachin, fresh from the Z-Storm unit, plunged a blade into a handicapped man amid a boozy spat. The clash started mundane, a trivial shove, heightening the horror. This slaying? No mere rage flare. It mirrored a psyche hardened by relentless slaughter. Could this spark a nationwide tremor against Putin's grip? No. Stakeholders in St. Petersburg vocalized against the leader. Was this an omen? Whisperings suggested they defied the operation and lambasted warriors. Marry this to the 90,000 spectral void, families, grasping fates, erode allegiance amid red tape. What path remains for Putin? As empires crumble within, the unseen legions march unchallenged. Their shadows lengthen over every alley, every home. Feel the icy dread, will your next acquaintance be a pardoned vulture? Previous part summary, in a country plagued by chaos, even petty fights can turn deadly. Ordinary conflicts escalate into brutal murders, revealing a deeper moral rot. The state appears to be unleashing violence rather than suppressing it, as returning soldiers and convicts commit acts of unimaginable cruelty. This growing lawlessness threatens to tear Russia apart from within. Imagine the sound of a calm evening shattered by a chilling scream. In the Ulyanovsk region, Alexander Lomachin, recently returned from the Z-Storm unit, was involved in a typical drunken argument. But then, out of nowhere, he stabbed a disabled man to death. What started as a simple scuffle ended in bloodshed, not as a moment of passion but as a terrifying reflex and instinct born from a mind dulled by violence. This is no isolated case. Elsewhere, a former prisoner named Razamakin, who had fought in Wagner units, was released just 10 days ago. Less than 2 weeks into freedom, he murdered an elderly woman living in his rented room. Before long, another former Wagner fighter, Mikhail Milichkov, stormed into a caravan where sleeping innocents lay. Without warning, he ended 2 lives. These stories are not just tragic, they reveal a terrifying truth: individuals hardened by war and lawlessness are wandering the streets. What's even more disturbing is what unfolds in the courtrooms. These hardened criminals face judges without remorse. They show no shame, no regret. Instead, they say things like, "I can still be useful," or "I can send more Ukrainians to the other world." These words are not just arrogance, they embody a moral collapse supported by the very machinery meant to uphold morality. The situation spirals further out of control. According to internal data, the first half of 2025 saw murders involving military personnel double from the previous year, 116 cases recorded. Serious crimes, including assaults and robberies, exceeded 333,000, an alarming 15-year high. As crime surges, the nation lives in fear. Every stranger on the street could be a pardoned killer, walking free because the state has turned a blind eye. The law enforcement agencies are powerless. The individuals creating this chaos have, in Putin's eyes, become the new elite. Their influence is cemented by a system that shields them from justice, igniting irreversible cracks within society. The very fabric of Russia is unraveling, and no one seems capable of stopping the descent into chaos. What if the true power lies not with the Kremlin, but within the chaos they have unleashed? Could this darkness, born from betrayal and silence, eventually swallow Vladimir Putin himself? The answer may lie just beyond the horizon. Russians now live in terror on their own soil, fearing not invaders from abroad, but the shadows lurking in their cities and suburban streets. Freed ex-convicts, once unleashed by Putin's war machine in a devilish pact, roam free with veteran status and a ruthless thirst for chaos. Law enforcement crumbles under shortages and underpaid ranks, leaving citizens defenseless in a wave of unchecked mayhem. This crisis tears at the fabric of society, breeding uncertainty and despair. Picture the stale, smoky air of a dimly lit courtroom, where a former soldier stands trial not as a villain, but hailed as a patriot. Your pulse quickens, you smell the faint mustiness of old wood benches, hear the low murmur of voices like distant thunder. It feels like sandpaper under your fingers, this injustice rubbing raw against the soul. What horrifying truth could shatter the illusion of a strong nation forever? Citizens gaze upon their leaders with wounded hearts, sensing betrayal that stings like frostbite on exposed skin. Instead of shields against harm, the regime empowers hardened souls to unleash disorder. Even worse, chaos grips the economy like a tightening vice. Surging crime inflates local budgets on safety measures, while unrest chokes off investments and everyday routine. Provincial areas transform into murky shadows, places where returned fighters instill dread, and law officers hesitate to act. Recall the Lomachin tragedy in Ulyanovsk, a deaf man slain in a misguided clash, where promises of watchfulness crumbled like dry leaves underfoot. Echoes of failure ripple through regions, exposing the rot at the state's core. Imagine the acrid scent of fear wafting through marketplaces, the thud of distrust pounding like heavy boots on cobblestones. Is this the unraveling of a nation's core defenses, leaving families adrift? Paranoia swells within, a stifling fog that muffles reason and blurs real dangers. Agencies scramble not after true threats, those bandits in the shadows or rogues crossing borders, but pursue intellects in white coats. Fresh mandates bar scholars from global ties without permission shrieks at the core. Brilliant innovators like Anatoly Maslov and Alexander Shiplyuk, pioneers in supersonic advances, face incarceration under betrayal claims. Putin extinguishes the very genius fueling his ambitions, a self-inflicted wound that reeks of desperation. The chill of betrayal seeps into your bones, faint whispers of dissent rise like wind through cracks. Could seething fury buried deep erupt, toppling a reign of iron that spanned 25 unbroken years? Yes, a flicker of defiance ignited in St. Petersburg, where academia voiced calls for change. Entities there blasted the ongoing conflict and hurled condemnation at those in uniform. Combine this spark with the haunting void of 90,000 unseen souls, families pounding on bureaucratic doors, pleading for closure, the powder keg builds. The sharp tang of anxiety lingers on your tongue, like bitter coffee awakening dread. What desperate gamble might the Kremlin clutch to snuff out the inferno? Strategic whispers foretell tighter clamps, and walls rising higher to seal Russia off. Unexpectedly, as bureaucracy grinds onward, a flashback pierces the haze. Remember the echo of boots on icy steps, the metallic bite of weapons hoisted high, the salty sweat of survival in a frozen trench. But today, that discipline fractures, spilling into streets like venomous bile. Judges tilt scales, granting leniency for so-called valor, while hidden tribunals deny realities, leaving kin in corridors of torment. Does the outrage march toward revolution, or does the leader's fortress hold against the tide? The tension coils tighter, each twist revealing layers of fracture we can barely fathom. The senior advisor to President Zelensky, Mikhail Podolyak, warned that the ongoing war in Ukraine has subdued social unrest and masked the country's economic collapse. He fears that if the fighting halts, Putin's regime may face the same downfall as the Bolsheviks in 1917. But paradoxically, the conflict has actually fortified Putin's grip, centralizing power among loyalists like Sergei Shoigu and Nikolai Patrushev. The security agencies, especially the FSB, have tightened their hold, silencing dissent and crushing opposition. Ending the war without a decisive victory would spell catastrophe for Putin. Some analysts warn that if the conflict ends with Ukraine's success, Putin could lose everything: his throne, his power, even his life. History offers a stark mirror. The Soviet Union's collapse partly stemmed from failing to defeat Afghan fighters during the 1980s. Today, Ukraine has become Putin's new Afghanistan, a deadly quagmire he cannot afford to abandon. The war has become the very breath sustaining his rule. If it stops, the regime could suffocate, collapsing from within. Yet, amid this ominous reality, cracks are appearing. By the end of 2025, the grim picture starts to crack open. The Russian people are growing weary of the endless fighting. Support for mobilization has dwindled to just a quarter of the population. The entire home front is shattered economically, morally, and legally. The message is loud and clear: the war is no longer confined to distant trenches. It has invaded every Russian household. Safety has vanished. An eerie silence now replaces the sounds of stability. Order has evaporated. When the fighting ends, an even darker struggle will erupt on the streets of Russia itself, an internal conflict far worse than anything seen before. What do you think this means for the future? Could Putin's grip really unravel as the nation descends into chaos? The truth is, the real war has only just begun. Imagine a Russia where the shadows of war no longer lurk at the borders, but slither through your own alleyways, where trusted faces now hide fangs sharpened by desperation and violence. Can one tyrant's gamble with criminals truly shatter a nation's soul? In this turmoil, families mourn, soldiers vanish like ghosts, their pleas echoing off in different walls in the courts. As loyalty crumbles, what dark steps will the Kremlin take next? The air thick with dread, carrying the metallic tang of unshed tears and the rough grip of unanswered letters, tens of thousands grieve for lost loved ones, their hearts pounding with rage. They bang on bureaucratic doors, the wood splintering under fists like fragile bones, demanding truth from a regime that buries secrets. What leverage does Putin hold in this descent? Strategic whispers foresee escalated repression, a fortress of isolation built on fear. Yet, beneath the surface, cracks widen as oligarchs and generals sense the ship sinking, their luxurious escape plans to distant shores sparking a frenzy of abandonment. Wealth flees like rats from a storm, leaving Putin to wield force against simmering revolts while conjuring phantom enemies to bind his dwindling faithful. But streets pulse with raw truth beyond his fabrications. Why cling to this bloody quagmire in Ukraine, even as the land fractures? The roots dig deep. Putin's grip, once iron, wasn't forged in omnipotence. On the eve of the 2022 assault, his sway hovered at 60 to 70%, buoyed by a robust coffers and relentless broadcasts. Fissures emerged early. Pension outcries erupted in 2018. Fists raised against austerity. Navalny's exposes peeled back corruption like old skin, then the pandemic mismanagement unleashed chaos, eroding faith. The invasion flipped the script. Twisted as a protective shield, the narrative painted foes as Nazi invaders under NATO's cloak, excusing the onslaught and chaining minds in unity. Over 20,000 dissenters seized, silenced. War became the perfect veil for economic ruin. By 2025, inflation raged at 20%, currency halved. Blame hurled westward, yet homegrown follies, misspent treasuries, diverted dreams, fuel the fire, humiliation burning deeper than any battlefield scar. Can this powder keg ignite at last? Each unresolved loss fans the flames, turning quiet homes into powder magazines. The humiliation of a regime blaming shadows instead of mirrors could shatter the unbreakable. Imagine the once bustling streets of Leningrad region's neighborhoods, where security was tight with 7 officers patrolling diligently. Now, just one lone figure shoulders the impossible burden for vast, echoing landscapes. Can you feel the chill of abandonment creeping in?
In these forgotten districts, the air hangs heavy with silence, no sirens wailing in the distance, no footsteps reassuring the night.
A single patrol officer now stretches thin across hundreds of square kilometers, his flashlight cutting through fog-laden woods where danger lurks unseen. What terror hides in that stillness? Why has this nightmare unfolded? Economic despair and political neglect weave a cruel web.
A patrol officer's pay sits at a meager 38,000 rubles, roughly $380, scraping by less than a city cashier's in Moscow alloys, yet the Kremlin showers soldiers with riches. Signing bonuses soar to 200,000 rubles for frontline brutes, plus perks that lure the young away, into uniform or exile.
Who wants to guard shadows when glory calls with glittering payouts?
But this rot festers beyond battered badges. The judiciary crumbles under warped decrees, its moral compass shattered. That infamous send to the front with amnesty scheme, hatched by Wagner from 2022 to 2023, erased criminal slates for war service. Handed off to the Ministry of Defense in 2024, it still slashes sentences with chilling ease.
Controversial laws breed catastrophe. Courts hail returning fighters as if they were saviors, though no edict whispers hero. Cases flood in, veterans dodge harsher justice for new atrocities.
Cloaked in patriotism's guise. Patriots who kill find leniency, sliding free with whispers of duty fulfilled. Worse still, the expunged pasts haunt anew.
Wagner's ghosts, unleashed again, slip through as first-timers for murders fresh and foul. Robbery, grave assaults, dismissed with slaps, forgotten records gleaming like false halos. Medusa's relentless reports peel back the fraud, exposing broken scales. And the Kremlin silences the storm. In 2023, directives strangled press liberty, bury crimes of homebound soldiers.
Guard the spirit, report nothing that dims the flame. Civilians stumble blind through rising tides, their streets warping into unknowns.
Do you sense the injustice thickening, like a storm cloud choking breath? Beneath this facade of order, chaos coils.
What twisted fate awaits when silenced masses finally erupt, demanding answers from courts clogged with ghosts? What twisted fate awaits when silenced masses finally erupt, demanding answers from courts clogged with ghosts?
The Kremlin's chokehold tightens, starving the judiciary of truth while families claw for closure.
How can a regime that feeds on forgetting survive the swell of whispered resentments, each court denial a spark in the powder keg? Stay tuned, as suspicions fester into something far more explosive. Imagine scenes of bureaucratic mazes, papers rustling like leaves in a gale, where mothers' tears stain cold benches.
Picture the bleak reality: Russia's most fundamental duty, safeguarding lives, erodes under relentless strain. But why? Economics and politics collide in a deadly dance. Unraveling the fragile thread of law.
A patrolman's wage barely nudges 38,000 rubles, about $380, scraping paltry cents compared to Moscow's bustling supermarket tills. Yet the Kremlin splashes fortunes on warlords, dangling 200,000 ruble signing bonuses like bait, plus allowances for those drawn to the front's grim lure.
The vibrant youth? Vanished, either drafted or fleeing abroad. Policing?
A graveyard shift no soul craves, its allure dimmed to dust in golden temptations. This plague spreads beyond crumbling stations.
The courts warp, twisted by decrees that mock justice itself.
Launching through Wagner's shadow in 2022 to 2023, the send to the front with amnesty pact wiped slates clean for combat. Passed to the Ministry of Defense in 2024, service still barters sharp reductions in sentences, a bargain is tainted as its tolls. Foundations tremble, legal dies sewn with threads of deceit, yielding horrors untold.
Echoes of heroism parade through halls, though unspoken.
Documented tales reveal veterans escaping lighter penalties for crimes committed post-service, framed as proof of loyalty.
Patriotic shields deflect wrath. But the abyss deepens alarmingly. Wagner's reborn convicts, repeating offenses, dodges novices, their pasts vaporized, enabling slayings, brutal assaults brushed aside like flecks of lint. Medusa's lens exposes the farce.
Kremlin's 2023 edict to scribes, mute reports of returning soldiers' deeds.
Shield the collective resolve, let no gloom seep through.
Russians roam unaware, necks crane toward mounting shadows.
Crime's undercurrents swelling unreported in alley shadows. Do you taste the bitterness of betrayal, cities cracking under facades too thin? Family hearts grow cold, denounced ghosts stacking dossiers. What ignites next, the spark of rebellion searing quiet paranoia?
Imagine the stark reality hitting Russia's heartland, where law enforcement has crumbled faster than abandoned buildings in forgotten towns. In districts once patrolled by 7 officers, just one now guards endless kilometers, leaving shadows to creep and threats unchallenged.
What explosive truth lies beneath this crumbling facade? Why is salvation handed to soldiers but denied to those who could shield the innocent?
The brutal answer intertwines greed and power plays that chill the spine.
Picture the desperation: a patrol officer's monthly wage, a meager 38,000 rubles, roughly $380.
That's less than what a bustling Moscow supermarket cashier earns, surrounded by the beep of registers and the sharp scent of fresh bread. Meanwhile, the Kremlin flings hundreds of thousands of rubles like bait to lure souls into the meat grinder of war. Putin dangles signing bonuses soaring to 200,000 rubles, plus extra payouts for those stepping toward the chaos.
Feel the exodus, the young, the strong, fleeing to army ranks or distant lands. Who wants to don a badge when it's a dead-end job, scraping by in a system rigged against them? Yet, this rot spreads beyond crumbling streets and empty precincts.
It infects the very scales of justice, warping minds and bending laws in ways that make your blood run cold. Dive deeper into horror, the Send to the Front with Amnesty scheme, birthed by Wagner from 2022 to 2023. It lured with a promise of pristine records, wiped clean for mere survival and slaughter. From 2024, that poison transferred to the Ministry of Defense, where service still carves down sentences like a butcher's knife.
Foundations built on controversy, consequences haunting like ghosts in the fog. Courts now hail these returnees as unsung saviors?
Think of it, former fighters dodging harsh punishments for fresh atrocities, excused on whispers of patriotism.
But worse?
Ex-Wagner criminals, their pasts erased, get treated as debutantes, brushing off murders or savage beatings with slaps on the wrist.
Medusa's incisive reports expose this fracture, line by line.
Then, a commandment from the shadows: in 2023, Kremlin edicts silenced voices.
No tales of crimes by frontline soldiers, they barked, fearing morale's break. Wary of sparking defiance,